Your partner's phone lights up, a name you don't recognize, a laughing emoji, and before you've even processed what you're looking at, something tightens in your chest, heart rate up, thoughts racing, a feeling you've been taught to be ashamed of, told to suppress, told means something is wrong with you. But what if jealousy was never the villain of the story, and the real answer is far stranger than simple insecurity?
Think about how jealousy gets talked about. It's treated as a character flaw, something toxic, something a secure, well-adjusted person supposedly shouldn't feel at all. Self-help books tell you to release it. Therapists sometimes frame it as evidence of low self-worth. And yet, virtually every human being who has ever lived has felt it. Across every culture, every era, every documented society we have records of. That's an odd pattern for something that's supposedly just a personal failing. Universal experiences usually aren't malfunctions. They're usually functions.
Here's where evolutionary psychology offers a genuinely uncomfortable reframe. Psychologist David Buss, whose research at the University of Texas has focused heavily on the evolutionary roots of human mating behavior, argues that jealousy isn't a bug in human emotional wiring. It's a solution to a very old, very real problem, one that shaped reproduction and survival for millions of years before anyone had a word for it. Consider what was actually at stake for early humans in a pair bond. For a man, paternity was never guaranteed. Unlike a mother who always knows with certainty that a child is biologically hers, a father historically had no such certainty. No test, no proof, just trust. If a partner was unfaithful, a man risked investing years of resources, protection, and care into a child that wasn't genetically his, an enormous evolutionary cost. For a woman, the risk looked different but was equally severe. If a partner's emotional and material resources shifted toward another woman, it directly threatened the survival odds of her own children, who depended heavily on that investment in an environment where resources were scarce and dangerous. This is where the research of psychologist Christine Harris becomes essential. Harris has spent years studying what's known as the sex differences hypothesis in jealousy, testing whether men and women are wired to respond more intensely to different types of infidelity. Her studies, along with related research in the field, found a consistent pattern. Men, on average, report greater distress in response to imagined sexual infidelity, while women, on average, report greater distress in response to imagined emotional infidelity. Neither pattern makes sense as random noise. Both map precisely onto the specific reproductive risk each sex historically faced. Sexual infidelity directly threatened a man's certainty of paternity. Emotional infidelity directly threatened a woman's access to sustained resources and protection. In other words, jealousy wasn't distributed randomly across human minds. It was calibrated, shaped by natural selection to detect and respond to the specific threats that once determined whether your genetic line continued or ended. This connects to a broader concept from biologist Robert Trivers, whose theory of parental investment reshaped how scientists understand mating behavior across species. Trivers demonstrated that the sex investing more heavily in offspring, biologically, in time, and in resources, tends to be more selective about mating and more vigilant about protecting that investment once made. Human jealousy, viewed through this lens, isn't some emotional glitch layered on top of rational thought. It's a vigilance system, finely tuned to protect exactly what evolution calculated was most valuable and most vulnerable: a mate's fidelity, a family's resources, the survival odds of the next generation. Now, none of this means every jealous outburst is justified, or that jealousy should be allowed to run unchecked. Evolutionary origins explain why an emotion exists. They don't excuse how it's expressed. A smoke detector serves a genuinely useful function, but that doesn't mean you let it scream indefinitely once you've confirmed there's no actual fire. Jealousy functions similarly. It's an alarm system, not a verdict. Its job is to grab your attention and demand you investigate a potential threat to something valuable. What you do after the alarm sounds is a separate matter entirely, one governed by conscious choice rather than ancient wiring. This reframing matters because it changes the question people usually ask about jealousy. The question isn't, how do I eliminate this feeling entirely, which fights against millions of years of evolutionary programming and mostly just produces shame on top of the original emotion. The better question becomes, what is this alarm actually detecting? And is the threat real?
Sometimes the alarm is picking up on something legitimate, a genuine erosion of trust, a real shift in attention or priority within a relationship. In those cases, jealousy is functioning exactly as designed, correctly flagging that something valuable is being threatened. Other times, the alarm is a false positive, triggered by insecurity, past trauma, or an ambiguous situation your mind is filled in with worst-case assumptions. The evolutionary framework doesn't tell you which situation you're in. It just explains why the alarm exists at all and why it's so difficult to simply will away. This also reframes what a healthy relationship with jealousy actually looks like, not the complete absence of the feeling, which would be evolutionarily strange given how consistently it appears across human history and culture, but the ability to notice it, investigate its source honestly, and respond deliberately rather than reactively. A smoke detector that never goes off isn't necessarily in a house with no fires. Sometimes it just means the battery's dead.
So the next time jealousy flares up, that tight chest, that racing mind, before reaching for shame, consider what that feeling might actually be protecting. Somewhere in your evolutionary history, an ancestor who felt nothing when a mate's attention drifted elsewhere was less likely to notice a real threat to their offspring's survival, and less likely to pass that indifference down to you. The version of humanity that exists today largely descends from people who felt jealousy, noticed the threat, and acted on it. Your partner's phone lights up, a name you don't recognize. And this time, instead of drowning in shame about the tightness in your chest, you recognize it for what it actually is. An old, imperfect alarm system doing exactly the job it was built to do.